Hi, friends, welcome back to True Crime Echoes, or if this is your first time here, I'm so glad you found us. This channel is where we take a deep dive into the darkest corners of true crime history. Not just the crimes themselves, but the people behind them, their lives, their lies, and the ripples they leave behind. And today's story, it's one of the most chilling cases I've ever come across. A woman who didn't just commit murder, she made it disappear. A killer so methodical, so unassuming that she convinced the world she was dead while possibly living under a new name, a new identity somewhere out there. We're talking about Belle Gunness, the Black Widow of the Midwest, the Butcher of LaPorte, and whether she died in a house fire or escaped into the shadows, one thing's for sure, she left behind more than bodies, she left behind questions that still haunt us to this day. Chapter 1. She wasn't supposed to be a monster. I don't know why this case got under my skin the way it did. Maybe it's because we've heard so many stories about male serial killers, male predators, male monsters, and we've been trained to spot them. But no one prepares you for a woman like Belle Gunness. She wasn't supposed to be terrifying, she was supposed to be the victim. A widow, a mother, a woman trying to make it in a man's world in the late 1800s. On the surface, Belle looked like someone life had been hard on, and in many ways, maybe it had. But beneath that quiet, grieving exterior, something dark was brewing. And when it finally came to light, it wasn't just shocking, it was unthinkable. Before I get too deep into the horrors of what she did, I want to take a step back. Because the thing is, monsters don't start out as monsters. Belle was once a little girl. Her name was actually Brynhild Paulsdatter Sturseth, born in a small village in Norway. She had siblings, parents' chores. Her father was a stonemason, and they weren't wealthy by any means, but they weren't destitute either. By all accounts, Belle was a bright and capable child. But then, something changed. There's a story unconfirmed, but it's one of those stories that sticks with you about how, as a teenager, Belle was attacked at a local dance. Some versions say she was pregnant at the time, and the man who assaulted her kicked her in the stomach. The baby didn't survive. And after that, Belle wasn't the same. Now, we don't know if that really happened. It's the kind of tale that gets whispered about someone after they're gone, and after their name is already in the papers. But whether that story is true or not, what we do know is that Belle carried a quiet rage, one that simmered just below the surface. She was determined to leave her hometown and never look back. So in 1881, Belle immigrated to the United States. She was in her early 20s alone and ready to start over. She even changed her name from Brynhild to Belle. And honestly, I think that says a lot. She wanted to become someone new, someone stronger, someone untouchable. And at first, it seemed like the American dream was hers for the taking. She married a man named Mads Sorensen, settled in Chicago, and opened a candy store. A sweet, unassuming life, right? But nothing around Belle ever stayed sweet for long. That's where things start to twist. Because what happened next wasn't just a run of bad luck. Fires, death, insurance payouts. And behind it all, Belle. Calm. Composed. Always one step ahead. This is the story of Belle Gunness, the Black Widow of the Midwest. And whether she burned in the fire or vanished into the night, one thing is certain, she knew exactly what she was doing, and she may have gotten away with it. Chapter 2. The Candy Store That Didn't Smell Sweet. When Belle arrived in America, she was chasing something security, maybe. Power, reinvention. I don't think she came here to become a killer. But I do think the wheels were already turning. After settling in Chicago, she married a man named Mads Sorensen. He was a fellow Scandinavian immigrant, Swedish, I believe, and from the outside they looked like your typical hardworking couple. They bought a modest home, and a few years into their marriage, they decided to open a candy store together. It sounds sweet, right? A husband and wife shop on a quiet street, sugar in the windows, the smell of chocolate and licorice in the air. But apparently the business was anything but sweet behind the scenes. Sales were low, expenses piled up, and soon the shop was failing. And then it burned down. It was sudden overnight. No one was hurt, thankfully, but the store was gone, just like that. and not long after Belle and Mads collected the insurance money. At first, no one really questioned it. Fires happened a lot back then. Buildings were made of wood, heating was unreliable, and people used open flames all the time. But looking back, that fire feels less like bad luck and more like foreshadowing. Still, they moved on. They didn't rebuild the store. And instead, Belle focused her energy elsewhere. That's when Mads took out a life insurance policy on himself. Actually, two policies. One was set to expire, and another had just begun. But for 2 days, those policies overlapped. 2 days where, if something happened to Mads, Belle would receive payouts from both. And guess what? Mads died on one of those 2 days. I mean, what are the odds? Belle said he came home from work complaining of a terrible headache. She offered him some quinine powder, which was commonly used for pain at the time. Then she claimed he went to lie down and never woke up. Just like that. It's like no warning signs, no prior illness, just a headache and then gone. The official cause of death was heart failure, but Mads's family didn't buy it. They were convinced he'd been poisoned, and honestly, I don't blame them. The timing was just too perfect. The insurance overlap, the sudden death, the fact that Belle cashed in both policies immediately after the funeral, it was all a little too convenient. They pushed for an autopsy. They wanted the body exhumed, but for some reason, it never happened. Whether it was red, tape, incompetence, or something darker, no one knows. What we do know is that Belle walked away with $8,000, which in the 1890s was a fortune. It would be well over $250,000 today. And with that money, she disappeared. Not literally, not yet. But she left her old life behind and started over again. I think that's one of the scariest things about her. The way she could just shed her past like a snake sheds its skin. A husband dies, a business burns, suspicions arise, and she simply moves on. No panic, no guilt, just the next chapter. And the next chapter would take her to a little town called LaPorte, Indiana. It would be the beginning of something much, much darker. Chapter 3. The Grinder Incident. After Mads's death and the insurance payout, Belle packed up and left Chicago. No dramatic goodbye, no grieving widow performance. She just moved on. And she ended up in a small town called LaPorte, Indiana. LaPorte wasn't anything fancy. It was a quiet place, mostly farmland, and Belle fit right in. She bought herself a decent-sized farm using the money from Mads' life insurance, and for a while she kept to herself. But not for long. She didn't waste time. Within a few months she met another man, Belle Gunness. He was a widower like her with a child from a previous marriage, and just like that, Belle was married again. It's strange, isn't it, how some people fall into love so quickly. But with Belle, I don't think it was about love. I don't even think it was about companionship. Belle wasn't building a family, she was building a setup. And Peter, he was just the next piece on her board. They opened a small butcher shop together in town, and from what I've read, Peter did most of the work. He handled the meat, the equipment, the day-to-day. Belle ran the books and stayed home with the children. But only months into the marriage, tragedy struck again. Peter was found dead in the house. The official story, a meat grinder, yes, a meat grinder had fallen off a high shelf and crushed his skull. Let me say that again. A fully assembled cast iron meat grinder supposedly fell off a shelf and crushed his head. Belle claimed it was an accident, said Peter had been adjusting something on the shelf, and it just slipped. She described it in full detail to the coroner's jury, how it came loose, how it fell, how it landed. She even referred to him as her poor husband, in that calm, measured tone she always used. And somehow, they believed her. The coroner ruled the death accidental. No charges were filed. And just like before, Belle collected life insurance. What's wild is how nobody questioned the pattern. 2 husbands, 2 sudden deaths, 2 payouts, 1 woman walking away untouched. It makes you wonder, how many deaths does it take before people start to see a pattern? After Peter died, Belle was once again on her own. But this time she wasn't just a widow. She was a widow with land income and children to raise. 3 to be exact, Philip, Myrtle, and Lucy. She also had a teenage foster daughter named Jenny Olson, who had been with her for a few years by then. By all accounts, Jenny adored Belle. She was quiet, obedient, and incredibly loyal. But something must have changed because not long after Peter's death, Jenny started telling people that she knew more than she should. She told a classmate almost casually that her foster mother had killed Peter. She didn't elaborate, just said it in passing like someone sharing a secret they weren't supposed to know. And then Jenny disappeared. Belle told everyone that she'd sent Jenny to Los Angeles to attend a private school. And oddly enough, no one questioned it, not the neighbors, not the authorities. Belle said it with such certainty, such authority, that people just accepted it. But Jenny never wrote. She never visited. She was never heard from again. Years later, we'd find out what really happened to Jenny. But at the time, it was just another strange chapter in Belle's story. Another quiet disappearance that no one pressed too hard on. Looking back, it's disturbing how easily Belle controlled the narrative. She didn't need to shout. She didn't threaten people. She simply told them what to believe, and they believed her. And maybe that's what makes her so chilling. She didn't look like a killer. She didn't act like one. She moved through life calmly, efficiently, and always with a plan. She played the grieving widow, the hard-working mother, the pillar of the community. But behind the curtains, something much darker was taking root, and it was about to grow. Chapter 4: Lonely Hearts and Missing Men. After Peter's death and Jenny's disappearance, Belle Gunness seemed to fall into a new routine. She ran her farm, she raised her children, she kept to herself. Outwardly, nothing about her stood out. And that's what makes what happened next even more unsettling. She didn't storm into people's lives like a typical predator. She invited them in, through carefully crafted letters, through charm, through hope. In 1907, Belle placed a personal ad in several Midwest newspapers, and it wasn't just your average widow looking for companionship. It was calculated. It was specific. She described herself as a comely widow, someone with good looks and charm, and said she owned a prosperous farm in LaPorte, Indiana. She was looking for a man of means, someone she could join fortunes with, and she made one thing very clear: don't bother writing unless you're prepared to visit in person. It was bait. And the men came. One of the first to answer her ad was a man named Ola Budsberg. He was an older widower from Wisconsin, and by all accounts a kind and honest man. He didn't tell his sons where he was going, maybe because he didn't want to be judged, or maybe because part of him knew it sounded too good to be true. But he did confide in a neighbor. He said he was headed to Indiana to meet a woman. He sounded hopeful, like maybe after years of loneliness, his life was finally about to change. He was never seen again. Then came Andrew Helgalian, a bachelor from South Dakota. He also answered Belle's ad. They exchanged letters for months, and Belle encouraged him to come stay with her permanently. She painted a picture of stability and warmth, a family farm, a fresh start. Andrew was cautious at first, but Belle was persuasive. She convinced him to sell his property and come to LaPorte with the idea of building a life together. And just like Ole, Andrew vanished. It wasn't immediate. He stayed with Belle for a couple of weeks, long enough to settle in, long enough for her to convince him to withdraw money from his bank and apply for a business loan. A check was issued. Belle intercepted it, deposited it quietly under her own name. And then Andrew was gone. No one heard from him, not his brother, not his friends. Letters went unanswered. And Belle. She claimed Andrew had left for Norway, that he'd run off with the money and broken her heart. It was oddly convenient. But here's the part that gets me. Belle didn't slow down. She kept placing ads, kept inviting men. She played the same role over and over, lonely widow looking for love and partnership. And men kept showing up, willing, hopeful, completely unaware that they were stepping into a trap. It's easy to wonder how no one caught on. But this was 1907. People didn't talk as openly. They didn't question widows. They didn't trace letters or bank transactions the way we can now. And Belle knew that. She knew how to work the system, how to exploit what people expected of her. She didn't need brute force. All she needed was a pen, a smile, and a promise. And underneath all of it was a graveyard slowly filling up. Chapter 5: The fire that changed everything. The thing about people like Belle is that they know when to disappear. She had this terrifying ability to sense when the walls were starting to close in, when it was time to vanish before the questions got too loud. And that moment came with Andrew Helgelien. Andrew's brother Assel had a bad feeling. He hadn't heard from Andrew in weeks. That wasn't like him. Andrew wasn't the type to just go quiet. He'd told his brother all about Belle the farm, the plan to build a life together. And now radio silence. So Assel did what any worried brother would do. He started writing letters. First to Andrew, no response, then to Belle. And Belle's answer, well, it was strange. She told Assel that Andrew had taken his money and left for Norway. She said she was shocked, hurt, completely blindsided, claimed he'd used her and then vanished. But something about it felt off. Too rehearsed, too convenient. Then Belle did something even stranger. She invited Assel to come visit the farm. Said maybe together they could look around and find some trace of Andrew. She acted concerned like she wanted closure too. But it felt more like a setup. And Assel wasn't the only one getting suspicious. Around town, whispers were growing louder. Where was Jenny, the foster daughter who'd supposedly gone to California? Where were all these men who came to the farm and never seemed to leave? And why did Belle keep making trips to the bank even though she claimed to be struggling? Whatever she was planning. She never got to finish it, because on the night of April 27th, 1908, everything went up in flames. Belle's farmhouse caught fire just before dawn. It burned fast, and by the time neighbors rushed over, it was too late. The house was gone, completely reduced to ash and rubble. Inside, they found the bodies of 3 children and the body of a woman. At first, everyone assumed it was Belle, but something was wrong. The woman's body was missing a head. It didn't make sense. Why would Belle be headless? Why would her children be in the house burned to death while she, this strong, calculating woman, was just gone? Investigators began to dig, literally. They combed through the remains, the ashes, the cellar. And they didn't just find fire damage. They found a jawbone. And that jawbone had teeth with dental work that matched Belle's records, according to the town dentist anyway. So officially they declared the body Belle Gunness. But if you ask me and a lot of other people, they didn't find Belle at all. They found someone Belle wanted them to think was her. And that fire, that was her final vanishing act. One last stage performance before disappearing into legend. Because what they were about to uncover on that property, what they found buried just beneath the surface, would reveal the truth about Belle. And it would change everything. Chapter 6. Buried Beneath the Farm. I wish I could tell you that the fire was the end of the story, that Belle died, justice was served, and the mystery was over. But what happened next was so much worse than anyone imagined. It started with a confession. Ray Lamphere, a former farmhand who had worked for Belle, was arrested shortly after the fire. He'd been seen near the property the night it burned. People already knew he and Belle had a complicated relationship. Some said he was obsessed with her. Others claimed he was just another one of her pawns. At first he denied everything. Said he didn't know anything about the fire or the missing men or the body without a head. But then, under pressure, Ray cracked. He told police to dig in the pig pen. That was it. No drama, no long explanation, just dig there. And when they did, what they uncovered was unlike anything the town of LaPorte had ever seen. The first body they found was Jenny Olson Belle's foster daughter, the one who was supposed to be in California finishing school. She'd never left. She'd been buried in the backyard the whole time. Next, they found Andrew Helgelien, the man whose brother Asla had been searching for him. The man Belle claimed had run off to Norway. He was there too, dismembered, wrapped in a burlap sack, buried like trash. And then another body, and another, and another. By the time they were done, they'd uncovered at least a dozen corpses. Some were identified, most weren't. The victims varied in age, appearance, background, but they had one thing in common. All of them had come to Belle's farm with hope. And none of them had ever left. The condition of the bodies was horrifying. Many were missing limbs. Heads were smashed in. Bones had been crushed or sawed through with chilling precision. Some were sprinkled with quicklime, a chemical often used to speed up decomposition and mask the smell of death. She knew what she was doing. This wasn't impulsive. This was methodical, practiced, controlled, and suddenly everything started to make sense. The missing men, the letters, the insurance claims, the strange silences. Belle hadn't just been a black widow, she was something darker, something far more terrifying. She had turned her home into a slaughterhouse, a place where hope went to die. And the most disturbing part, they weren't even sure they'd found all the bodies. The property was large, the soil was soft. There were so many places to hide the truth. People came from other towns, even other states, hoping to identify loved ones who had gone missing. Families brought old photos, descriptions, clothing items, anything that might help. But for most of them, there were no answers, only bones. Some experts believe Belle may have killed as many as 40 people, maybe more. We'll never know the exact number. So many records were lost, so much evidence destroyed in that fire. And that raises the question again, did she die in that fire? Because let's be honest, Belle was smart. She'd gotten away with so much already. 2 dead husbands, a vanished daughter, half a dozen missing men, and every single time she walked away, richer, calmer, untouchable. So, when a fire conveniently destroys her home and a woman's headless body is found inside, doesn't that feel like just another one of her plans? She had the means, she had the motive, and she had the pattern. If anyone could fake their own death and disappear forever, it was Belle Gunness. Chapter 7. Did she get away with it? Here's the thing that's haunted me ever since I first heard Belle Gunness's story. It's not just what she did. It's what she might have gotten away with. The body they found in the ashes of her farmhouse, the one everyone assumed Belle, was missing its head. That alone raised serious doubts. But what really threw investigators off was the size. The corpse didn't match Belle's known weight or height. She was a large woman, nearly 200 pounds, over 5'8". The body considerably smaller. So, who was it? Some believed it was a housemaid. Others thought Belle had lured another unsuspecting woman to her farm, someone roughly her age and appearance, just to use as a decoy. Kill her, burn the body beyond recognition, toss in a few of her own belongings, and disappear. It sounds like a movie plot, but when it comes to Belle Gunness, the unbelievable starts to feel plausible. Yes, the jawbone found in the rubble was matched to her dental records. But that's based on one dentist's word in 1908. There were no x-rays, no digital scans, just memory, just trust. And how many patients did he see every week? Could he really be that certain? It's frustrating. Because for every piece of evidence that says she died in that fire, there's another that says, maybe not. After the fire, there were dozens of reported sightings. Belle in Chicago, Belle in New York. Belle spotted boarding a train out west under a different name, nothing confirmed, but nothing completely dismissed either. And then there was Ray Lamphere. Before he died in prison, Ray confessed that he'd helped Belle fake her death. According to him, she planned it all. Found a woman who resembled her, murdered her, staged the fire, and vanished into the night. Ray claimed he set the fire, but didn't kill anyone. That he was used, manipulated, like so many others. Do I believe him? I don't know. Ray wasn't exactly a reliable narrator, but still, it fits. It feels like something Belle would do. She was careful, calculated. She planned everything, down to the smallest detail. The scariest possibility isn't that Belle died without punishment. It's that she never died at all. That somewhere under a new name in a different town, she started over again. That she kept doing what she'd always done, just better, smarter, with fewer mistakes. We think of serial killers as impulsive, chaotic. But Belle was methodical, patient. She didn't kill for pleasure. She killed for gain, for control. And that, to me, is even more terrifying. She wasn't out of control. She was completely in control, every step of the way. And the fact that we still don't have a definitive ending to her story, that's what keeps it alive. Chapter 8. The Legacy of a Killer. I think the saddest part of this story, the part that really stays with me, is how many people never got closure. After the fire and the discovery of the bodies on Belle's farm, families from all over the country came to La Porte. They traveled by train, by carriage, by foot, carrying photos, clothing, even old letters, anything they thought might help identify the loved ones who had vanished after answering Belle's letters. And the truth is, most of them never got answers. Many of the remains were too decomposed, too damaged. Some were dismembered beyond recognition. The forensic tools we rely on today didn't exist back then. There were no DNA databases, no fingerprint records, just bones and grief, and silence. That's what Belle left behind, a silence that echoed through dozens of families across states, across years. What do you do when someone you love vanishes into thin air? When the last thing you know is that they were chasing hope, a second chance, a new love, a dream, and then... Nothing. Belle didn't just kill people. She erased them. That's what makes her story so brutal. Not just the deaths, not just the violence, but the erasure. The way she turned human beings into footnotes in her own twisted narrative. Men became bank deposits. Children became liabilities. Anyone who got too close disappeared. And the town of La Porte. It was never the same. For a while, the farm actually became a tourist attraction. People came from miles away just to see the ruins, to stand where the bodies had been found. Vendors sold popcorn and souvenirs. Like it was some kind of sideshow. It's horrifying, but also kind of telling. We're drawn to darkness. We want to understand it, maybe even control it by putting it in a box, calling it entertainment, giving it a name, making it less unknown. But there's nothing tidy about this story, because even now, over a century later, we don't have all the answers. We don't know how many people Belle killed. We don't know for sure if she died in that fire. We don't even know who the woman in the ashes really was. We just know what she left behind, a burned-out house, a backyard full of bones, and a trail of unanswered questions. People called her the female Bluebeard, a monster, a myth. Some even tried to romanticize her, to paint her as a tragic figure hurt by life, driven by desperation. But I don't buy that, because no amount of pain justifies what she did. No trauma explains the way she calculated every move. Belle didn't act out of chaos. She acted with intention, with strategy, with purpose. And if she really did escape that fire, then she was more than a killer. She was a ghost in her own story. Chapter 9. Echoes that never fade. There's something about this case that stays with you long after you hear it. Maybe it's the unanswered questions. Maybe it's the cold calculation of it all. Or maybe it's the fact that Belle Gunness doesn't feel like someone from the past. She feels timeless, like she could exist today, right now, behind a different name, in a different town, smiling at her neighbors like she always did. Because Belle didn't look like a monster, and that's what made her so dangerous. She was ordinary. That's the part I can't shake. We expect killers to be obvious. We want them to look evil, sound evil, act evil. But Belle shattered that illusion. She was a mother, a neighbor, a business owner. She made pies, she went to church. She sent letters sealed with promises, and she buried bodies in her backyard. To this day, there's no confirmed photo of her after 1908. No traceable footprint, just stories, whispers, the occasional sighting that never leads anywhere. Some say she lived out the rest of her life under an alias in Mississippi. Others say she died quietly in a small town out west. No arrests, no confession, just disappearance. And I think that's exactly what she wanted. If Belle did fake her death, and honestly, it's hard not to believe she did, then she pulled off one of the most chilling disappearances in American criminal history. Not just because she escaped punishment, but because she vanished so well. Most criminals get sloppy, greedy, they want credit. They want to be remembered. But Belle, she seemed content just disappearing. As if the destruction she left behind was enough. As if she didn't need to be seen, just felt. And we do feel her. Every time someone tells a story about a charming killer. Every time a crime seems too calculated to be real. Every time we hear about someone who just vanished after meeting someone online or answering an ad or following a promise that sounded too good to be true. Belle may be gone, but her story never really left. It lingers in headlines, in nightmares, in the quiet fear that sometimes the person smiling at you is hiding something far darker than you could ever imagine. So, what do you think? Did she die in that fire? Or did she slip away into the night and keep on living just under a different name? Was she a cold-blooded killer from the start? Or a woman shaped by hardship who learned the wrong lessons about survival? I don't have the answers. No one really does. But what I do know is this evil doesn't always come with a warning. Sometimes it wears an apron, sometimes it bakes bread, and sometimes it writes you a letter inviting you to a quiet farm in Indiana, where no one ever hears from you again. Thank you for spending time with me today, and for walking through this incredibly dark and complex story. I know it's not easy to sit with stories like this, but I believe remembering them matters. Because Belle Gunness wasn't just a historical figure, she was someone who walked among people who trusted her. And sometimes the most terrifying truths are the ones hiding in plain sight. If this story stuck with you the way it stuck with me, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Belle really died in that fire? Or did she pull off the ultimate vanishing act? Don't forget to subscribe, and hit that little notification bell so you won't miss the next deep dive here on True Crime Echoes. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and as always, stay safe.